Alright guys, I had a couple of people ask me about how we treat our knives, the carbon steel, to keep them from rusting and protect them and such. When you're out in the bush, unless you just carry a rag like a tough cloth with you, and I'll pick one of those up tomorrow and show you what they're like. There's no way to keep carbon steel from rusting if you actually use it. Don't know how well the camera going to pick it up, but there are some rust spots on this blade right about in here, and then on the other side, of course, there's a few where it's starting to patina a little bit. If you're worried about it, I've got some just regular wet dry silicone paper here, 1000 grit. Just cut me off a little piece with that. Get me a little swatch of it. Wet it just a little bit here. I know what I'm doing with a knife. I'm comfortable doing this number here. It doesn't take any pressure, and if you'll notice, I'm keeping my hand up and letting the paper bend down into the blade a little bit here. If you're a little bit scared, you don't know how to handle a knife, what have you, a safer way to do it here, lay this on the table and tilt that blade forward just like if you were going to sharpen it. And you'll notice the main finger that's doing all the work is on the back edge of this blade. It's closer to the spine. I'm not worried about cutting myself this way. There's no way you can slip and get your finger up under this. I've just got a piece of wax paper laying down here. The point is still exposed, so when you get near the end of the blade, if you're worried about cutting yourself, pick the blade up a little bit so that the point's poking down into the table. Honestly, it doesn't take very much pressure, this, at all. I mean, no pressure. Again, you can lay it down, do what you need to do on the back edge of the blade, and you can see it's quickly taking off that little bit of rust with just what little bit of pressure I'm using. And you can get to the edge. If you need to get the actual cutting edge of the blade, you can take the sandpaper and pull it down using light pressure. But most of this, if there's any rust on it, that will come off when you're actually sharpening the knife. I don't usually worry about trying to clean the edge up, because when I put it back on the steel, on the stones rather, that'll come off and polish. But just a little 1000 grit paper, a little bit of moisture. And yeah, I use spit. I'm in the South. We use spit for everything. It's my knife. It's going to cut my food. So it ain't that big of a deal for me. You can see the black that's coming up. Some of that is the wet dry paper itself. Some of it is actually little pieces of metal coming out of it. And we'll just go back over to the other side just to make sure we got it all. Rust is kind of like cancer. If you don't get it all, it will come back. Notice I'm holding the blade with the back or the spine in my hand. That way I don't worry about cutting through the rag and slicing my hand open. So now I've got all the rust off of it. Got it cleaned up here so it's nice and shiny. I could take it over to the buffing wheel and actually polish it up, make it look new again, but I ain't worried about making it look new. I just want to protect it. What I've got here is just a tea light candle. I'm going to go ahead and light that. Probably should have lit it and let it start melting a little bit beforehand, but it's all good. And you can either use the wax from the tea light candle itself, or you can go out and get you some paraffin wax. It's real cheap. I think I paid $1.80 for this at my local Food Line. And we will score this down. Break me off a little piece of it. I usually have some of this already broke down, but I used it all making fire starters. What I usually do is take the paraffin and just rub it into the blade. Again, if you're not experienced, if you don't know what you're doing, lay the blade flat on the table. Just rub it on the blade like such. Again, and then for that edge, just act like you're sharpening it, but go backwards with your strokes. And note the camera's picking that up, but you can see it's got a fairly heavy coating of wax on it. This next step, keep in mind, it takes a 400-degree heat, a minimum of 45 minutes on this blade to change the temper in it. So by what I'm about to do, I am not changing the temper of the blade at all. I'm going to go ahead and get that out there, because I know there's some people who are going to say, you're running the temper of your blade. I'm not keeping it in the flame for an hour, folks. It's just a few seconds. You can either take a lighter as such and heat the wax up a little bit, or if you've got a little tea light candle, you can take it and hold it over that candle without putting it out and heat it up just a little bit and wipe. And I don't do this all the time. This is just what I do if I come back from the woods and it's going to be a while before I use the knife again. I'll do it this way because it helps put a layer on that blade to keep it from rusting up in the sheath itself. Makes it clean. Puts a nice thin coating on it, and you can actually feel the slickness of it where the wax has actually gone in. You can lay it down on the table and give it a good generous little scrubbing if you want to. And because it's a food grade wax, I'm not worried about anything on this blade being deposited into any meat or vegetables, anything like that, any fruits or anything that I'd cut the next time I go out. It's not going to hurt me. The tough cloth that you can pack in your pack when you're in the field is actually just a little rag, not much bigger than this scrap of t-shirt here. And it's got a chemical in it that's perfect for treating metals to keep them from rusting. And it's 100% safe and non-toxic. It'll really put a shine on a knife and keep it that way. But I like the paraffin wax. It doesn't take but just a few seconds to coat it on. It doesn't use hardly any of the wax itself. And like I said, I've never had a problem with, you know, going and getting a knife later on and it having rust on it. And I do that with all of my knives. If I'm going to be putting them back in storage for a while. You know, the Mora sheath has a drain hole in it, but going from the cold climate outside, you stick your knife in your sheath, you come into a warmer climate in your house, you wrap this up and put it back in your drawer or what have you, and there's going to be condensation forming on the inside of this sheath just from going through the climate changes, and that condensation is going to collect on this blade, and the next time you go to pull it out, that's usually where your rust comes from. It's not from, you know, the blade being wet when you actually put it in the sheath to begin with. It's from being in storage for a while. So that's just how I do my blades as far as, you know, taking care of any rust that's on them and keeping them from rusting again in the future. Anybody got any questions or anything, or you got a better way of doing it? Put up a video. That's all I got to say. Cable Guy Ken.